One of the big ethical questions I've been asking myself in the lead up to Christmas is whether I need to order one Scotch egg or two. After all, how substantial is substantial? I mean, I've had the ones in Sainsbury's next to the sandwiches, a tasteless egg wrapped in suspiciously springy sausage meat, adorned in mysteriously orange breadcrumbs. And I've had the ones in the pub that cost more than a Christmas dinner, freshly cooked with a runny yolk and perfectly spiced sausage meat. Either way, I was delighted when the fruit of the loins of a chicken wrapped in the flesh of a pig captivated our national attention for an entire news cycle, because let's be honest, it was a welcome distraction, wasn't it? After all, in many ways, it's felt like we've been stumbling around in the dark for almost a year now. Go out, don't go out, feel free to go out, but whatever you do, do not go out. Perfectly captures the crippling uncertainty we've all been subject to. A year that started with 2020 vision rapidly turned into 2020 cosmic collision with ourselves, and it's caused us to go to some dark places, hasn't it? I'm beginning to think I'm the problem now that my commute is from my bedroom to my living room and I'm still late for meetings. And why are the end of Zoom calls so awkward? And what does it say that instead of using cans of food as substitute weights for my morning workout, I've taken to lifting the psychological burden of simply existing? And I know it's in the past now, but I still can't get over what you did with the toilet roll. And then, of course, at times the questions have been darker. Surely we need to wonder whether we should have the family Christmas we deserve and risk great Aunt Betty's funeral in the new year, or do we just resign ourselves to watching Home Alone on repeat with a newfound appreciation for Kevin's isolation? How has it become the daily norm to track rising deaths on the news like viral videos on YouTube? And how is it possible that everything we have built our life on has been brought to its knees by a viral particle 700 times thinner than the width of a human hair? But then there have been flashes of light, haven't there? Or was it just me fighting back tears, applauding NHS heroes I've never met, or cheering on a 99-year-old man doing laps of his garden with the same level of excitement as Mo Farah in 2012, Rashford putting his head above the parapet to stand up for children who can't afford to eat, Trump finally ejected from the White House, the first female and black vice president-elect, and of course mass vaccination on the way. But is it enough to push back the darkness, the unmeasurable grief caused by the loss of loved ones, the economy crippled by a year of uncertainty staring down the barrel of Brexit, the impending trauma of joblessness and bankruptcy? The 220 people in Brockley who come to our food bank because they can't afford to feed their family. In fact, since we're on the subject, why are kids relying on Rashford to feed them during the school holidays? And surely Tom, at his age, shouldn't need to walk 100 times around his garden to fund a national service that saves people's lives. And now that we've faced the end of the world once, suddenly apocalyptic climate change seems all the more plausible. And does it really take a black man being executed by the police live on social media to make us realise we have a problem with racism? And then, of course, there's been the perpetual darkness within. In many ways, the collective trauma of the past year has helped us make sense of our own personal journey with mental health. We've cried together, we've mourned together, we've felt hopeless together. But can a vaccine make us immune to our pre-existing condition, or will anxiety and depression steal the momentary joy of a post-COVID house party and a summer holiday in France? Now, I know what you're thinking. This is not what I signed up for. Isn't he supposed to be talking about a cute donkey and a comical innkeeper, or cows waking up a baby in a manger? Well, I hate to burst that bubble, but none of that actually happened in the Christmas story. In fact, it's fair to say that the circumstances into which Jesus was born were also incredibly dark. The people of Israel had been living for years under the crippling weight of an oppressive empire. Their religious leaders had sold them out and heaped spiritual guilt and shame on them so as to control and manipulate. Their monarch was a despot dictator who, upon hearing of the birth of a baby some wished to worship as king, had all the boys under the age of 2 brutally killed in an act of mass genocide. And it's into this darkness a baby was born, through whom the Apostle John, who knew him best, claims all things were made, and in whom life in all its fullness can be found, and from whom shines a light that, no matter how dark the darkness may appear, radiates so bright it can never be overcome. And he's pushing back the darkness, and he's bringing hope, and he's bringing joy. Of course, that's a remarkable claim for a baby born in a backwater town 2,000 years ago to peasant teenagers. So remarkable, in fact, you'd expect the baby become man to play down such talk of divinity. After all, most our messianic figures in the past have stopped short of claiming to be God in flesh. Gandhi said, "It's unwise to be sure of one's own wisdom. It's healthy to be reminded that the wisest might go wrong." Buddha said, "I die seeking the truth, not finding or owning it, but seeking." Muhammad claimed to be a prophet of God, not God himself, not the same as God. And David Beckham said, "My parents have always been there for me ever since I was about the age of 7. The problem with Jesus is that no matter how hard we try, it's impossible to pigeonhole him into the good moral teacher category our secular rationalistic mindset requires of us. Why? Well, because he said ridiculous things like this. He said, "If you've seen me, you've seen God." He said, "I am the bread of life. If you come to me, you'll never go hungry again. If you believe in me, you'll never thirst again." And he made this statement, a claim which many Christians would say has got them through the past year. He said, "I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you'll never walk in darkness, and instead you'll have the light of life. A life of hope, a life of joy, a life of purpose." What's the evidence? Well, Christians point to the remarkable life that Jesus led, the way that he loved the unlovable, the miracles he performed, his forgiveness given through his death on a cross, his resurrection 3 days later, the post-resurrection appearances to many and more than 500 at once, the change in his disciples from depressed disillusionment to a willingness to die for what they had witnessed, the explosion of the early church, the billions of people who still believe in him 2,000 years later. And of course, all of that requires careful scrutiny, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for now, do you want to experience the light that brings life this Christmas? Because I believe if you want to, you can. There was a moment in my life when it felt like I'd been stumbling around in the dark for some time, and it was at that moment that a friend invited me to come to his church. He ended up bailing on me as I was on my way, but oddly, I still went, and when I arrived, the music had already started, and to my surprise, as soon as I went through the doors at the back of the building, I started to weep uncontrollably. I wasn't crying because I was in pain. I was crying because suddenly I felt completely relieved. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest, like darkness had been pushed back, like a light had suddenly been switched on. And I came to realize that this experience had nothing to do with the building I was in and everything to do with an encounter with Jesus. Since then, I've not been able to stop encountering Jesus, and since then, I have never felt overcome by darkness again. It doesn't mean I haven't noticed the darkness. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been hard. It doesn't mean that I haven't felt exhausted by this year, but it does mean that no matter how intense the darkness has felt, the light of Jesus has always been stronger. I've seen him overcome darkness in the most miraculous of ways. I felt his overwhelming love for me at the lowest of moments, and I've known his peace in the most telling and testing of circumstances. And the message of Christmas is this: no matter how dark it feels right now, no matter how exhausted you feel, no matter how hopeless this year has been, you too can experience the relief of his light in your life. And his light will push back the darkness. His peace can transcend all of these circumstances, and his hope really can carry you through. How can you experience the light of Jesus? Well, it's simply received. None of this comes from ticking the right religious or moral boxes. None of it relies on us or our own ability to make it happen. Surely if it did, it wouldn't be possible to keep up the act. All of it is a gift because of who Jesus is and because of what Jesus has done.